All right, we are in lesson 9, multi-track sessions. We're going to look at the waveform and multi-track editors, some organizational tools, some playback tools, and some of the effects, and ways to process multiple tracks with a single effect and sidechain effects. All right, so scrolling down here. I really think of Multitrack Editor like Premiere's editor. I don't really do much personally in a waveform editor because those are destructive. I use primarily Multitrack. In a waveform editor, the single clip is the only audio element. In the multi-track production, there are multiple audio clips that make a musical composition or a soundtrack, right? So one track could contain just drums, another bass, another vocals, or you could have a bunch of different things. And it's all instances of clips. If you have a clip on top of another, only the one on top plays. Otherwise, you would want to do merging clips if you wanted to do that. So reviewing the production process, tracking is recording or importing the audio in. So if you're recording a band, if you are recording a voiceover, tracking it in. If we're importing sound for a film, we're usually importing this from Adobe Premiere or Resolve or whatever the editor used. Overdubbing is when you record additional audio tracks over. You usually would overdub in another track. After you record, you edit. And editing is removing audio, picking between options, adding additional stuff like audio effects, Foley, background tracks, and then mixing is blending together into the final stereo or surround file, and that's adjusting levels and adding effects, and that's where you really use multi-track editing. All right, so let's look at creating a multi-track session. The session file is the actual project, just like in Premiere. The project, all the data is about the references to the source audio, but what you're saving is a Premiere file in Premiere that points to video and audio files. We're doing the same in Audition, just with an Audition project multi-track session. There are templates that you can use. Let's say File, New, Multi-track Session. Control-N does the same thing. And you can see that there are these different templates. I often use film, sequence, stereo, or surround for the kind of stuff I do. We are going to do an untitled, a template list 1 for the purpose of this assignment. And I will save this into my folder, and I'm going to make a lesson 9 Audition folder. I always make a new folder for every session so that any data stored is always in the same folder. This computer's a little bit slow when it accesses the hard drive for the first time after a while. I need to change that setting. There we go. And I already made a lesson 9 Audition folder. Select the folder. I never call things untitled session. Lesson 9 example. And we'll do 48 and 24 bits. And stereo. For us, normally for film these days, we're doing 32-bit float and either 48 or 96. And you could rearrange things, label them, and this is just about creating a new template. Get these back small. I was just using my scroll wheel there. So if I call this Boom, Lav, and I may want to change the track color. I right clicked, change the color to orange. Okay, so you could do whatever you want to do there. Now we're going to make this into a template. So File, Save As, and that's where we now will save it to where Adobe wants session files. So we could name this lesson 9 example template, then you have to put it in the right folder. So I'm not going to go through that navigation. It's listed of where you would save it, and it goes into session templates. Okay. So if you get into something you use all the time, you could save it this way as a template, and it would pop up when you do a new multi-track session. It would be one of these templates. All right, so the fact that Audition provides the multi-track and waveform, and you can go back and forth between them, is pretty handy. I don't have anything in waveform, so I can't switch back and forth right now, but it is nice. In the multi-track editor, you're referencing clips. In the waveform editor, you're actually editing the audio clip. If you have a whole bunch of files back to back, like loops, then it's actually only one physical clip stored, and then you're just referencing different versions of the clip. Okay, so let's close off what we have, and we're going to open up File, Close All. No, I don't want to save changes to that. And we are going to open the session that they've put together in Lesson Files, Lesson 9. And we're looking for Mobius Remix. And we're going to open up Mobius Remix Adobe session file. And as always with these exercises, we will make sure to reset to save layout to make sure everything is the same as expected. And let's play it so we can hear what this sounds like. Okay, so we get the idea. It works very similarly to the waveform editor, except it's playing back all the tracks at the same time. And when you do the move playhead to previous or next, it automatically goes to whatever the next edit is. But you can also use markers to add markers. So you can place playhead, and you could say, say if right there I want to put a marker for whatever reason, and you can say edit marker, add cue marker, and that puts in marker 1. Or we could press the M key. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that and press M, and it throws a marker in. And then you can press Control Alt on Windows or Command Option on Mac and do the left and right arrow keys to bounce around between markers. And we can open up the window for markers. Why am I not seeing my markers here? Add another marker. Added the markers. Show markers of all files. There we go. Now we're seeing these markers, and I could rename these. Come on. Ah, because they're cue markers, it's not letting me rename them. All right, anyway, we can have the markers in here. I'm going to reset to saved layout, just so we're back to the standard look. Okay, so to check out the waveform and Multitrack Editor integration, we're going to click on the first clip in the main drums track right here, and it's selected. And then we can go over to the waveform editor and see it. You can see from here, I could also double click and it will open up waveform editor. And 9 also opens that. And if we look in the panel, we can also see all the different files that are open in this multi-track session. So we're going to open up the file bass sub F#H. Okay, and we're going to take down its amplitude a little bit. So we can say effects, amplitude and compression, amplify. Sliders are linked. I'll go down -1, and it takes them both down. And I could preview it. And apply. And now it's been taken down, and that would be true for all instances of it. So you can see where it's been taken down by -1 decibel. Okay, now let's look at changing track colors. So I'm back on multi-track view. And if we click on this square, I double clicked on it. Now I could change the color. So I could change base to yellow. And that will change all the clip colors too. And we can reset to standard. Okay. Okay, now let's look at the tracks panel. So when you're working on complex sessions, you may find it useful to hide tracks. So we can go to Window, Tracks, and that shows kind of like in Photoshop, just visibility. So we can take off visibility. We can also do some automatically hide or display tracks based on the type of track or clips on them. So we could show only tracks with clips within. Those are the only options here right now. Or we could load presets and save presets. So where this makes a lot of sense is if we say when we're mixing a film, if we have all of our dialogue set to one group. So let's just pretend for a minute these ones, right? So we can track visibility, save to preset 1. Now this preset is set. Now let's say we wanted just these two. I can track visibility, save to preset 2. Now I can load preset 1, and ta-da, what I just saved is set. Okay, let's make all of our tracks visible again. And now let's look at looping selections for playback. So we'll be hearing what happens when several tracks play back in their own clips simultaneously, and you may want to loop these sections so you don't have to wait for parts of the music that you don't need, or if you're working on like one scene or one little section of a film. So let's get the time selection tool up here in the main bar. And you could press T to get that too. And we don't want to select a clip, but just up here. Sorry, in here, but without selecting on a clip. So I don't want to click on here and select the clip, right? I could go from here to make a loop. And now I can change the selection. So say I just wanted to hear this section right here. And then if I have the loop button selected, like it's unselected, select it. And we'll return to the move tool. V also does that. And that's how you make it just loop for playback. All right, now let's look at track controls. And I'm just going to click away to unselect those spaces. So there are two sections which affect playback. One section has a fixed set of controls, and the other is an area where controls change based on the function. So let's make this bigger so that we can see all this section. And it's actually main drums they want to take a look at. And if we want to resize them all, I'm hovering over and then I use the scroll wheel and I'm going to make them all smaller. Hover over any of them and I'm going to make them all bigger. So I'm scrolling up with the wheel on my mouse. So the main track controls are most commonly adjusted for mixing. So we're at the beginning of the session. And I'm going to click transport play. I'm going to take off loop and hit play to begin playback. And we're going to mute out the main drums. Where are they? Right at the top. Okay. Play. And here we have the main drums are muted and you can hear there's nothing there, but everything else will still play. And the mute button turns bright blue-green when it's selected. Now, if we select both mute and solo, the mute button has priority. If I have just solo, we only hear the drums. The R button is for recording. We're not recording right now, so we're not going to do anything with that. We're going to keep the main drums soloed. Now, Audition has two solo modes, exclusive, that solos one track over all the others, and non-exclusive, which is the default. So we can have multiple tracks be soloed and listen to them both. To cancel soloing, you can hold Control while clicking a solo button, and that will just undo it for everybody. And if you want to change the mode as a default, you can go into Edit, Preferences, Multitrack, Edit, Preferences, Multitrack, and we could change that solo preference. See here, it's on non-exclusive. We could change it to exclusive. Now we can move tracks to reorganize them. So like we'll move the percussion track to be below main drums. So I'm just going to drag it and drop it up here. Now you have volume and you have pan. I solo this and show you guys if we pan all the way to the left. Or all the way to the right. If a track signal goes into the red, the track's meter's red lights remain lit, so you can see the maximum level. And then if you need to reset it, you just click on here to clear it. And if you need to return to default of 0 for volume or pan control, you can hold down Alt for Windows or Option for Mac and click the control you want to reset. So let's say like if that was -20 and I want to, I could just Alt and click on the wheel and it resets to 0. Okay, so we're going to play and change the track position and the volume. Sum to mono would make it all go mono. So look, I'm going to change volume down low, bring volume back up. Sum to mono. See, now it's flat both channels. And look, I'm going to clear out that clip. Pan. And right. And Alt click and bring it back. Alt click, bring it back. Okay. So we have this area over the track controls for inputs and outputs, effects, sends, and EQ. We're going to get more into EQ in another lesson, but let's take a quick look at EQ. So you see each track now has EQ versus the inputs, outputs, FX, sends, and EQ. Let's make sure we're seeing all the controls. So right now it's this flat line because no EQ has been affected. We can draw on the EQ. We could change this to one of the presets. Like we could throw acoustic guitar on and see how it sounds. So that's interesting. Okay, let's close this. And now we see the graph. Now each track also can get its own effects. See, I by far prefer effects racks when I organize my films, and I'll have everyone on the same track and do effects that would affect them versus using the waveform editor. There are 16 potential slots per track. And you can use the same effects as you would have in the waveform editor, but you can change the position of the effects in the signal flow. So let's look at the first one, and we're going to add delay and echo. And analog delay, Canyon echoes. Feedback to 70. Now we hear all those effects of the repeats. This is the master on-off, which I just showed you guys. Sorry, that's the on-off for this one. This is the master for all of them. This one is if it's pre-fader or post-fader. Right now it is defaulted to before, that the effects happen before the volume. If you change it, it would go to after. So it changes the echoes down as well because the effect is pre-fader. So now post fader, you hear how the echoes were significantly louder. So we'll go back to pre-fader and alt-click to take that to 0. And now we can remove the effect. So I'll click on this arrow and remove effect. And let's take this off so we'll be able to hear everything. And we're going to look at the sends and buses. So the concept of a bus is kind of grouping everything together into a submix. To make it so we can see a track, we could click on the zoom selected track so it fills up just this track if we wanted to. Just a tip. Now, we don't want to have to reduce a master volume control too much. It should remain around 0 decibels, but if you have to lower it more than a few decibels, you really want to reduce individual tracks to get to output level. Typical video productions average -20 decibels. A lot of YouTube stuff is really more like -6 is the max, but -20 and peaks of -14. But I mean, people are pushing web-based stuff a lot. But we want to be careful to not have to just use our master fader to bring things down. So a bus contains not audio clips, but a mix of one or more tracks. Everyone has the master bus, which provides master output. Mono, stereo, 5.1 surround, whatever it is. Everything feeds into that by default. So the master bus, get this back to here. Okay, the master bus by default has everything. And we can see the same things. Let's go back to inputs, outputs. Default output is going out. And read. So we'll click play here where some things start. All right, and it's done that way so that it will never go past 0. So if we change this to 0, now there will be distortion. So let's go back to -4.5. So one of the ways we use buses is to add effects to a group, and another is to create monitor mixers. So if you want to add one or more effects to several tracks, like reverb, a bus is a good way to do it. So this way you can kind of group the tracks together and only use up one processing power on it. So the third button in the effects view is this little lightning bolty thing. And that's the pre-render track. And that's where it would pre-render any effects and create a temporary file. It's kind of it's rendering so that you're not doing it live. But if you modify it, they have to render again. So the other solution is the sending tracks to buses to do a single reverb effect. And it also just helps if you might want to tweak your reverb a little bit, then you don't have to change it on every one. And then monitor mixes are another way you use buses because you may have multiple outputs and the bass player wants different mixes than the vocalist. Or if you're doing a bus for, say, ADR and you don't want to hear your original voice, or you need to do a lower volume for the original voice. So let's go to our sends area. Just here, sends. We already are expanded so we can see the controls. We can add a bus by clicking in the blank area. Right-clicking in a blank space in the track. And there we go. Mono bus, stereo bus, 5.1 bus. And the output is automatically assigned to the master bus. So that's one way to add a bus up here. Let's go back to here, send one, add bus. And we're going to add a stereo. And that bus gets created right there. And we'll rename this reverb. And that name change occurred up here too, automatically. And just to keep me sane, I'm going to move percussion up above this. Now we're going to add percussion to this bus as well, to reverb bus. Now let's actually add that reverb. So we'll change our view to effects rack. And we're going to add reverb. Okay, they want us to do studio reverb. Drum plate large. Dry slider to 0. And wet slider to 100. Wow, that's going to have some massive reverb. Okay, so let's go back here. Solo main drums, solo percussion, and the reverb bus is automatically soloed. Let's play it. Okay, by default, sends do not have any level. We're going to have to turn up the main drum's send volume to get anything. So let's go to our sends. See, it's at negative. So we'll turn up to -6 to hear it. And I'll turn up percussion. And I'll play this for you guys. So there's a lot of reverb on the percussion because more is being sent to the reverb bus than from the main drums bus. And within reverb bus, a second, I think our reverb bus. We're going to hear that difference in how much it's sending. Okay, buses can be sent to other buses. So under base streaming, let's alt click to undo our soloing. Right click on a blank space here under this one. Track. Add a stereo bus. We're going to call this delay bus. Reset that too. I just was messing around. Okay. Organ Church. Also expand. Okay, so we're going to expand all these so that we can see their settings. Okay, we're going to take Pad Dreamy Brass and send it to, sorry, delay, I need to be in Pad and send it to Delay Bus. Organ Church, we will send to Delay Bus. And now we'll add the delay in the delay bus. I'll just change back to effects so I can see in delay bus that I want to add a delay. Analog delay. And they say do 2000, which has been chosen to match tempo. Wet out 100%, dry out 0. Feedback 50%. Trash 0. Spread 200. Okay. Now we'll go back to the sends area. And we're going to solo these two. And the track send volume to -8 and -8. Okay. Let's look at our time display in bars and beats. Go to measure 7. Okay, now in delay bus, we are also going to add it to reverb bus. It's going to send to reverb bus. Okay, we're going to turn up its send to 4. And we can go back and forth to hear how this works. Okay, so that's that part of the lesson. And now we can say File, Close All, No to All. The second part, channel mapping, I'm going to have to do tomorrow. So I'm going to stop this lesson partway through.